When this vet's hands started pumping on a dying baby elephant's chest, everyone thought he was crazy. But what happened 8 minutes later left the entire room in tears, and the reason this elephant was dying will absolutely shatter your heart. The radio on Dr. Michael O'Dara's desk screamed to life at 3:47 in the morning. His hand shot out in the darkness, knocking over a cold cup of coffee as he grabbed the receiver. The voice on the other end was breathing hard, talking fast. Kenya Wildlife Service Rangers were bringing in a baby elephant, female, maybe 4 weeks old, found beside her dead mother near Tsavo. The mother's face had been hacked off by poachers. Her tusks were gone, her body left rotting under the brutal African sun. Dr. O'Dara pulled on his boots and ran across the dark grounds of the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust Elephant Orphanage in Nairobi. His headlamp bounced wild shadows across the buildings as he sprinted. 18 years as a wildlife vet had prepared him for almost anything. But the fear in that ranger's voice made his stomach twist into knots. He burst through the clinic doors and flipped on every light. The room flooded with harsh white brightness. He laid out IV bags, syringes, antibiotics, heat lamps. His hands moved fast, setting up everything he might need. But deep down, he wondered if anything would be enough. 40 minutes later, truck headlights swept across the compound gates. The big vehicle rumbled to a stop outside the clinic. Dr. O'Dara's light fell on the back of the truck, and his breath caught in his throat. A tiny gray body lay perfectly still on a canvas stretcher. She was covered in dried mud and blood. Her eyes were swollen almost completely shut. Thick yellow gunk crusted around her face. But it was her breathing that terrified him most. 8 seconds passed. 9. 10. Finally, her little chest lifted with one shallow gasp, then nothing for another 10 seconds. Dr. O'Dara pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. The heartbeat under his fingertips was weak and slow. Too slow. Way too slow. A healthy baby elephant's heart should beat about 80 times per minute. Hers was barely hitting 35. He grabbed his stethoscope and pressed it against her chest. The sound was like a dying drum, irregular beats struggling through thick silence. Her body temperature read 95 degrees on his thermometer. She was freezing cold even though the African night was warm. Sarah Kamani stood beside him with tears running down her weathered brown face. She had worked with orphaned elephants for over 20 years. She had seen hundreds of babies arrive at the sanctuary. But something about this tiny creature fighting for every breath made her want to scream. The baby couldn't have been away from her mother for more than a day and a half, which meant she had spent 36 hours alone in the wilderness. Blind, terrified, calling for a mother who would never answer. Dr. O'Dara shined his light into the baby's eyes. The infection was horrible. Flies had laid eggs in the wet corners of her eyes while she was too weak to shake her head. The baby worms had eaten away at the delicate tissue. Even if they could save her life, she would probably never see again. Elephants need their eyes to learn from their mothers, to spot danger, to understand the world around them. A blind elephant in the wild was a dead elephant. The team worked fast. They slid a needle into a vein in her big floppy ear. It took 3 tries because her veins had collapsed from not having enough water in her body. Finally, warm fluids started dripping into her bloodstream. Antibiotics to fight the infection. Medicine to bring down the swelling. They wrapped her in soft blankets and positioned heat lamps around her tiny body on the clinic floor. For 3 hours, Dr. O'Dara watched every number on his monitors. Her heart rate climbed to 48 beats per minute. Her breathing got a little bit better. Her body temperature crept up toward normal. By 7 in the morning, when the sun painted the sky orange and gold, it looked like they might have saved her. The team named her Njema, which means good one in Swahili. They needed to believe her story could have a happy ending. Dr. Odera stepped outside to talk to the staff arriving for their morning shifts. He explained what had happened to the baby, the treatments they had given her, the fact that she would probably be blind forever. Everyone stood quiet, their faces sad and worried. But they all nodded. They would do whatever it took to help this little elephant survive. At 8:15, Dr. Odera was getting ready to clean Gema's infected eyes when an alarm started screaming. The sound cut through the quiet morning like a knife. He spun around and stared at the monitor. Gema's heart rate was falling, fast. 45 beats per minute. 40. 35. Her breathing, which had been getting better, suddenly became weak and choppy again. Dr. Odera ran back into the treatment room. His mind raced through possibilities. Bad reaction to medicine, internal bleeding they had missed, or was her body just too broken to keep fighting? He pressed his stethoscope against her chest and listened. Her heart was there, but barely. A weak fluttering sound, like a butterfly trapped in a jar, getting quieter, getting slower. Her breathing slowed down to 15 seconds between breaths, 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and then, at exactly 8:17 in the morning, her tiny chest stopped moving. The monitor showed her heart rate dropping like a stone. 30 beats per minute, 25. 20. Dr. Odera pressed harder with his stethoscope, as if pressure could somehow make her heart beat stronger. He could still hear it, faint and irregular, fading away like a radio losing its signal. "She's coding," he shouted to his team. His voice cracked. "We're losing her." But could anything save a dying baby elephant whose heart had already given up the fight? The treatment room exploded with noise and movement. James Mutua grabbed the red emergency drug box from the cabinet. Sarah Kamani pulled out syringes and started filling them with adrenaline. Everyone knew their job. Everyone moved fast. But Dr. Odera stood frozen beside Njema's body, his mind spinning in circles. In 18 years of saving wild animals, he had never done CPR on an elephant. He had read about it in textbooks, seen diagrams, talked about it with other vets over beers at conferences, but reading about something and actually doing it were completely different things. An elephant calf weighed 200 pounds. Her heart sat in a different place than a dog's or a cat's heart. It was tucked deep in the center of her chest, protected by incredibly strong ribs and thick layers of muscle. And elephant babies were fragile despite their size. Those tiny ribs could snap like dry twigs if he pressed too hard. Broken ribs could puncture her lungs or her heart, killing her instantly. But if he pressed too soft, the compressions wouldn't do anything. Her blood wouldn't move, her brain wouldn't get oxygen, she would die. Anyway, he had maybe 90 seconds to decide what to do, before her brain started dying from lack of oxygen. The monitor beeped slower and slower. 15 beats per minute. 10. The space between beeps grew longer and longer. Each beat might be the last one. Njema's gums had turned from pale gray to dead white. Her tongue was turning blue. Every second he stood there frozen was a second closer to the point where nothing could bring her back. "Michael, we need to do something now." Sarah's voice cut through the fog in his head. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was strong. She had watched too many elephants die. She wasn't going to watch another one without a fight. Dr. Odera sucked in a deep breath and made his choice. He would try CPR, adapting everything he knew about humans and large animals to fit this tiny elephant's unique body. He dropped to his knees beside Njema's chest. He placed both hands on her sternum, the flat bone that ran down the center of her rib cage. Normal CPR on a human was fast, 100 to 120 compression per minute, but elephants' hearts beat slower than humans' hearts. He would need to go slower, deeper. He pressed down, using his body weight to generate force while being careful not to hear or feel any cracks. 1 compression, 2, 3. Sweat already dripped from his forehead. James moved to Njema's head. He gently straightened her long trunk and placed a small oxygen mask over the 2 holes at the base where she breathed. He squeezed a bag that forced air into her lungs. They had to work together perfectly. 5 compressions from Dr. O'Dara. 2 breaths from James, 5 compressions. 2 breaths. A rhythm they had to keep going for as long as it took. Dr. O'Dara pushed down on Njema's chest over and over. Push, release, push, release. He could feel her ribs bending under his hands. Too much pressure, and they would break. Too little, and her heart wouldn't pump. He had to find the perfect balance. His arms started burning after 2 minutes. His shoulders screamed. His back felt like it might snap. But he couldn't stop. Not for 1 second. Sarah jabbed a needle into the IV line and pushed the plunger. Adrenaline flooded into Njema's bloodstream. The powerful medicine could shock a dying heart back to life. Or it could do nothing. They were throwing everything they had at this crisis. Modern medicine. Prayer. Sheer stubborn refusal to let death win. 5 minutes crawled by like 5 hours. Dr. O'Dara's whole body shook with effort. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands were going numb. But he kept pushing, kept fighting for this tiny life that had already been through so much horror. The monitor kept beeping its death song. Slow, irregular. Each beep weaker than the last. Then, at minute 6, something changed. Dr. O'Dara felt a flutter under his palms. A tiny tremor in Njema's chest that wasn't caused by his compressions. He stopped for just 1 second and pressed his ear against her rib cage. There! A heartbeat, weak and stuttering but real. The monitor beeped a little faster. 15 beats per minute. 20. 25. Keep going, Dr. O'Dara commanded. His voice was hoarse. He started compressions again, with new energy burning through his exhausted muscles. They couldn't stop now, not when they were so close. James kept squeezing the bag, forcing oxygen into her lungs. Sarah prepared more medicine, ready to support Njema's struggling heart. At 8 minutes, Njema's chest suddenly rose on its own, a breath. Small and shaky, but completely independent. Then another breath, and another. Dr. O'Dara's vision blurred with tears as he continued compressions, helping her heart remember how to beat on its own. The monitor showed steady improvement. 30 beats per minute. 35. 40. At 10 minutes, Dr. O'Dara finally stopped. He fell back against the wall, his arms hanging limp and useless. His whole body trembled. Njema's heart rate held steady at 45 beats per minute. Her breathing was weak but regular at 18 breaths per minute. She was alive. They had pulled her back from death. The room went silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor and Njema's soft breathing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Dr. O'Dara slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He couldn't feel his arms. He couldn't catch his breath. But he had done it. He had performed CPR on a baby elephant, and it had worked. Sarah handed him a bottle of water. Her hand shook so hard that water slopped over the sides. "I've never seen anything like that," she whispered. "You brought her back, Michael. You actually brought her back." But Dr. O'Dara couldn't celebrate. Not yet. They didn't know if Njema's brain had been damaged during those minutes when her heart stopped. They didn't know if her body could recover from everything it had been through. And they still had to deal with the terrible infection in her eyes. An infection that would probably leave her blind for the rest of her life. He watched her tiny chest rise and fall. Each breath was precious. Each breath was a small miracle. But he had only won the first battle. The war to save Njema's life was far from over. In the next few hours, they would need to operate on her eyes. They would need to teach her how to eat and drink, even though she couldn't see. They would need to give her a reason to want to keep living when everything she loved had been stolen from her. Dr. O'Dara had restarted her heart with CPR, but as he looked at her small broken body lying on the clinic floor, he wondered if he had done the right thing. What kind of life waited for a blind baby elephant in a world that had already shown her nothing but pain? Could a baby elephant, who couldn't see, ever learn to truly live again? 2 days passed in a blur of constant monitoring and medical care. Njima drifted in and out of consciousness. Her tiny body struggled to recover from the cardiac arrest and the raging infections. IV fluids dripped steadily into her veins. Antibiotics flowed through her system. The team checked her vital signs every 15 minutes, ready to jump into action if her heart faltered again. On day 3, Dr. O'Dara couldn't wait any longer. Njima's eye infection had gotten worse despite all the medicine. The swelling was so bad that fluid leaked constantly from beneath her eyelids. He had to operate now, or the infection might spread to her brain. He gathered his surgical team and prepared the small operating room next to the elephant nursery. The surgery took 4 long hours. When Dr. O'Dara finally looked closely at Njima's eyes, his heart sank like a stone. The infection had completely destroyed both corneas. The tiny worms from the fly eggs had burrowed deep, eating away tissue and nerves. He carefully cleaned out all the dead and infected parts. He flushed her eye sockets with powerful medicines. But he knew the truth. Njima would never see again. The damage was total and permanent. After the surgery, while Njima was still sleeping from the medicine, Dr. O'Dara called a meeting. He sat down with Sarah and the elephant care team in a small office. His voice was quiet when he told them the news. Njima would live, but she would be blind forever. The room went silent. Everyone knew what that meant. In the wild, a blind elephant was doomed. Elephants use their eyes for everything: to learn from their mothers, to spot predators, to read other elephants' body language, to find food and water. Even in a sanctuary, a blind elephant faced enormous challenges. But the immediate problem was even worse. Njima still hadn't eaten anything since she arrived 3 days ago. The IV was keeping her alive, but that was only temporary. Baby elephants needed to nurse constantly. If Njima didn't start eating soon, her organs would shut down. All their heroic efforts would be for nothing. The team tried everything they could think of. They offered her bottles of warm milk formula. They tried to guide the rubber nipple into her mouth. Njima turned her head away. Her little trunk pushed weakly at the bottle. They tried different formulas, different temperatures, different positions. Nothing worked. Sarah spent hours sitting with the baby, talking softly, stroking her rough gray skin, trying to give her the comfort a mother elephant would give. But Njima wouldn't eat. Dr. O'Dara called elephant experts around the world. He video chatted with researchers in Thailand, India, South Africa. One expert suggested that Njima might be suffering from deep depression. Orphaned elephants who witnessed their mothers' deaths sometimes just gave up on living. The trauma, plus the shock of sudden blindness, had broken something inside her. She had decided to die. On day 5, Dr. O'Dara was reviewing the initial reports when something caught his eye. He grabbed his phone and called the ranger station. When Thomas Kariuki answered, Dr. O'Dara asked him to explain exactly how they had found Njima. What Thomas told him made the room spin. The mother elephant hadn't been dead when they found her. She was alive. Barely alive, but breathing. Her face had been hacked away. The wounds were massive and terrible. She was bleeding out, clearly dying, but she was still trying to protect her baby. Njima had been pressed against her mother's side, trying to nurse, her tiny trunk touching what was left of her mother's face. The rangers had faced an impossible choice. They couldn't save the mother. Her injuries were too severe. She was suffering horribly. They had to end her pain. They had to euthanize her. And Najema had been right there for all of it. She had felt her mother die, not as something that had already happened, but as something happening right in front of her. Dr. Odera felt sick. The phone nearly slipped from his shaking hand. Nyema hadn't just lost her mother. She had experienced her mother's death in real time. She had been pressed against her mother's body as the life drained out. Then as her own eyes became infected and her world went dark, she had stayed beside that body for 36 more hours, waiting, calling, hoping her mother would somehow wake up. The psychological damage from such an experience was almost unimaginable. Elephant calves stayed in constant contact with their mothers for years. The mother's heartbeat, breathing, scent, and touch formed the foundation of the calf's entire world. Nyema had lost all of that in the most violent way possible, and she had lost her vision at almost the same time. Her world had collapsed into complete darkness, inside and out. Dr. Odera sat alone in his office that night, staring at Njema's file. They had saved her life with CPR. They had pulled her back from death through skill and determination. But had they done the right thing? What kind of existence waited for a blind, traumatized elephant who didn't want to live? Who had no mother to guide her? Who saw nothing but darkness whenever she tried to remember her life before? The sanctuary's management was starting to talk about difficult options. If Njema kept refusing food, if her quality of life couldn't be restored, they might need to make the compassionate choice. Sometimes keeping an animal alive when they were suffering was crueler than letting them go. Dr. Odera knew they were right, but he couldn't accept it. Not yet. Late that night, he visited Njema in her recovery pen. She lay on her side, bandages wrapped around her ruined eyes. Fluid still seeped through the white gauze. Her breathing was shallow and labored. He sat down beside her in the darkness and placed his hand on her shoulder. He could feel her heart beating under the rough skin. Still beating. Still fighting even though her mind had given up. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to her. "I'm sorry for what they did to your mother. I'm sorry you had to be there when she died. I'm sorry we can't take away your pain." As he sat there, listening to her breathe, Dr. Odera made a promise. He would give her 2 more weeks, 14 days to find a reason to live, 14 days to show them there was still a spark worth saving inside her traumatized mind. If she couldn't find that spark, he would make the hardest decision of his career. He would end her suffering. But somewhere deep in his heart, in a place beyond logic and medical training, Dr. Odera believed Njema's story wasn't finished. He had felt her heart restart under his hands. He had witnessed her body's fierce determination to survive, even when her mind wanted to surrender. There had to be a way to reach her, to help her understand that despite everything she had lost, life still held something beautiful, something worth fighting for. But what could possibly heal a broken heart that had witnessed such unimaginable horror? The answer came from the most unexpected place. On day 7, Dr. Odera was making his evening rounds when he ran into Mary Wanjiru outside Njema's pen. Mary was the sanctuary's animal behavior specialist. Sitting calmly beside her was her personal dog, a beautiful golden retriever named Baraka. Mary explained that her usual dog sitter was on vacation, so she had been bringing Baraka to work all week. He was a certified therapy dog who had worked with traumatized children at hospitals. Very calm, very gentle, perfectly trained. But that wasn't why Mary had stopped Dr. Odera. She had noticed something strange over the past 2 days. Every time Baraka walked past Njema's pen, the elephant's ears would perk up. They would rotate toward the sound of the dog's paws clicking on the concrete. It wasn't a fear response. It was more like curiosity, like interest. Dr. Odera felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Elephants usually fear dogs and other predator-like animals, especially traumatized elephants. But Njema's reaction was different. He asked Mary to walk Baraka past the pen again, while he watched from inside. As the dog's nails clicked softly on the walkway, Njema's entire body changed. Her head lifted slightly. Her trunk, which had been lying limp, extended into the air and waved gently. She was testing the air, gathering sense. Most amazing of all, she made a soft, rumbling sound. The first non-distress vocalization she had made since arriving. An idea exploded in Dr. O'Dara's mind. Radical, unprecedented, maybe crazy, but no crazier than performing CPR on a baby elephant. What if Njema was responding to Baraka because dogs were simpler than humans, less overwhelming, more predictable? Maybe a dog could reach Njema in ways that humans couldn't. Maybe a dog could speak a language her traumatized mind could still understand. Mary was both excited and nervous about the idea. Introducing a dog to a traumatized elephant could go horribly wrong. But she trusted Baraka completely. The dog had an almost magical ability to sense emotional pain and adjust his behavior. If any dog could help Njema, Baraka was the one. The next morning, they set up a careful introduction. Mary brought Baraka into the viewing area next to Njema's pen. A strong barrier separated them so they could smell each other, but not touch. Baraka immediately lay down in a relaxed pose. His tail wagged slowly. His eyes were soft and gentle, not threatening at all. Njema's response was remarkable. Within minutes, she had shifted to face toward Baraka. Her trunk extended, constantly moving, gathering every bit of scent information. Baraka began making soft, whining sounds. Not distress sounds, conversational sounds, like he was talking to her. To everyone's shock, Njema responded with her own sounds, small chirps and rumbles that the team had never heard before. Over 3 days, they gradually increased contact, first through the barrier, then in supervised meetings in a neutral space. Baraka's behavior was extraordinary. He seemed to understand instinctively that Njema was blind. He would make sounds before moving, letting her track his location with her ears. He approached slowly, always telegraphing his intentions through voice and scent. The miracle happened on day 4. Mary brought a bottle of milk formula into the pen as usual, expecting Njema to refuse like always. But Baraka was there this time. The dog positioned himself near the bottle. Then he did something nobody had trained him to do. Baraka picked up a soft toy in his mouth and carried it to where Njema could reach it. When her trunk touched the toy, Baraka made a soft, encouraging sound. It was like he was showing her that good things still existed in her dark world. That gentle interaction was still possible. Then Baraka moved to sit right beside the milk bottle. His presence marked its location. Njema's trunk explored the air, following his scent. When her trunk bumped the bottle, she froze. For a long moment, nothing happened. The entire team held their breath. Then slowly, almost hesitantly, Njema wrapped her trunk around the bottle and brought it to her mouth. She took one small drink, then another. Within 5 minutes, she had consumed 4 ounces, more food than she had willingly taken in 7 days. Tears streamed down Dr. O'Dara's face as he watched through the observation window. This was the first sign that Njema actually wanted to live, the first crack in the wall of despair that had been killing her. From that moment, Baraka became central to Njema's recovery. The dog spent hours each day with the elephant. They developed a unique language that transcended species. Baraka alerted Njema to food, water, and people. He played gentle games, encouraging her to move and explore despite her blindness. Most importantly, he provided constant companionship. He filled the horrible emptiness left by her mother's death. Njema's physical recovery accelerated once she started eating. Her weight increased. Her surgical wounds healed. Her vital signs stabilized. But her psychological transformation was even more amazing. The elephant, who had been curled in despair, began showing curiosity. She started making more sounds, communicating with humans and especially with Baraka. Dr. Odera worked with Mary to develop training methods for blind elephants, using Baraka as a guide. They discovered Njema could navigate complex spaces, using sounds, smells, and textures. She built detailed mental maps in her mind. Baraka helped by always standing in the same locations, providing reliable landmarks Njema could use to understand where she was. As weeks passed, their bond grew deeper. Njema would greet Baraka each morning with excited chirps and trunk touches. The dog responded with tail wags and gentle sounds. They developed games unique to their friendship. Baraka brought toys for Njema to explore. Njema used her trunk to gently push the dog around in ways that seemed to delight them both. 6 months after her arrival, Njema had transformed completely. From a dying elephant with no will to live, she had become a thriving, playful young elephant who happened to be blind. She had learned to eat independently, to navigate confidently, and most importantly, to trust again. Baraka remained her constant companion, the dog who had given her a reason to keep fighting when everything else had been taken away. Dr. Odera stood at the edge of Njema's pen one evening, watching her play with Baraka in the golden sunset. He thought back to that desperate morning when he had pumped her chest, fighting to restart her dying heart. He had saved her life that day with medical skill and determination. But it was Baraka who had saved her soul, who had shown her that love could still exist in darkness, who had proven that even the most shattered heart could learn to trust again. The baby elephant whose heart had stopped was now running and playing, her trunk wrapped around a dog's tail, her ears flapping with pure joy. This was why Dr. Odera had fought so hard to save her. This was why he had refused to give up when death seemed certain. Because every life deserves a chance to discover that hope can emerge from the darkest places. That healing can come from the most unexpected friendships. The real miracle wasn't the CPR that restarted Njema's heart. It was the unconditional love that taught it to beat with joy again.